Call of Duty 2 is the second game in the Call of Duty franchise, if that wasn't made obvious already, and it's pretty much just an exact copy of the first game, but better. The game was released on October 25th, 2005, just 2 years after the first game. And the game is once again you fighting in World War II, which yes, is exactly what we did in the last game, but somehow they've made it so much better. In the first game, you started out as the Americans, then advanced to the British, and then finally finished with the Russian. In this game, however, you start with the Russian. Now you once again start out with a training course, but this one's a lot shorter than the last one, because it's not really a proper training course, you're actually on a mission, which I think is a really cool way to start the game. Now, as soon as you load in and you take a look around, snow. You see a lot of snow, and you could tell that it's cold. This is something that we didn't have in the last game, and just that small feature makes the game a lot more realistic and overall enjoyable. So the training course is fairly simple, teaches you how to shoot a gun and throw grenades.
These are potatoes, Comrade Commissar. Why are we using potatoes instead of real grenades?
Because real grenades are valuable. In fact, they are worth a lot more than you are.
So yeah, instead of throwing grenades, you throw potatoes, which, quick fact, this is the only Call of Duty game where you'll ever be able to throw potatoes. And the game will let you know that repeatedly throughout the games. When you're playing the game and something happens, sometimes one of your teammates will yell, "Potato masher, run!" Which I think is a really cool small detail. Now this is cool and all, except for the fact that this continues on to the British and the American and Call of Duty 3 and Call of Duty World at War, and there's even an achievement for it in Call of Duty World War II. Something you also may notice is that you don't have a health bar. Probably the worst thing about the first Call of Duty game. In the first game, you had a health bar, and if you lost health, the only way to regain health was to find medkits around your mission. But Call of Duty 2 is the first game to implement the take cover and hide. Basically, if you take too much gunfire, your screen will turn red and bloody, and you'll have to take cover to regain the health, which is just a so much better system than a health bar. Another thing that they fixed was the MG42. In the first game, whenever you used this gun, it was just impossible to see anything you were aiming at. So in this game, they gladly fixed that. One other thing to mention is the sounds. In the first game, the gunfire sounds were incredibly obnoxious and very repetitive. In this game, each gun has its own unique sound, and it makes it a lot more realistic and fun to play. So while you're in the middle of the training course, you have to be sent out into the mission already because they need you. And while running to the point, it teaches you how to crawl and crouch. And you're immediately sent out to kill Nazis. Now, the Russian section of this game is probably my favorite because just in the second mission of this game, this happens.
Damn those fascists! They barricaded themselves on the upper floors! Shouldn't we ask them to surrender, comrade?
Like, okay, we're in the second mission, and this game is already so much cooler than the first game. Definitely worth the 2-year wait. So now moving on to the British segment of the game. Now the British segment of the game takes place in Egypt, which is a complete switch up from Russia. Instead of cold, snowy climates, you're put in a desert, which I think is a really cool way to change things up so the game doesn't seem very repetitive. Now, most of the British segment revolves around you in the trenches and clearing out towns and tank warfare, which is once again just really cool and a really good switch up from the first game. Now, one thing that really stands out in the British segment is the sounds. When you're in tunnels in the trenches, you can hear the echoes and the screams, and it just makes everything so much more realistic and somewhat scary. Moving on to the American segment, which is the last part of the game, it immediately starts with D-Day because how fitting. Now, the D-Day mission actually does a great job of showing how awful the day was. As soon as you're met with land, you get knocked down and you're pretty much out for a couple seconds while you see your fellow men get shot down. Once you regain consciousness, you scale the cliffs of Omaha Beach, which, I mean, come on. This is just so cool and a complete upstep from Call of Duty 1. Now, specifically in the American segment, you spend a lot of time in the trenches, which I completely don't mind. I think this is really amazing, and it's a different pace from just clearing out buildings. Now, possibly my favorite mission of the entire game is one where you have to defend a German bunker after clearing it in Bergstein, Germany. Now, basically, you clear out the bunker and you have a bunch of wounded soldiers inside. Now you're tasked with defending the bunker while the German infantry try to break in. Now, you have to do this until reinforcements arrive, which, once again, I think is a great way of doing a mission rather than just clearing out towns and buildings. There's even parts in the mission where other people tell you, preserve your ammo because we don't have much left.
You enemy weapons your ammo! Use whatever you got! Gather weapons and ammo! Reload your weapons!
Now, coming on to the last mission, Crossing the Rhine, or Operation Plunder. This was a pretty good ending, but I'm not too sure if it beats the first game's ending. The mission starts out with you controlling a gun on an amphibious vehicle heading up to Wiesel, a German town that's about to get obliterated. The game ends with you taking over the town and killing every single Nazi in it.
Potato masher! Run! Looks like this town is ours, fellas!
Now, this specific mission was especially important because it was the last major obstacle the Allied forces needed to overcome in order to make further advancements into Germany. Basically, it was the last major battle before the last battle of the war. So it wasn't the last, but you sure helped. Now, moving on to gameplay, immediately you could tell that the graphics are so much better than the first game, which it better be for 2 years. The weapons feel a lot more smoother and better to handle, which is definitely a step up from the first game. While in the first game, you got to shoot a rocket launcher at a tank, in this game, you get to actually move up to the tank and plant explosives on it, which is a lot harder than just shooting a rocket at it. Now, I really enjoyed some of the missions in this game a lot better than the first game, like some missions like D-Day or Crossing the Rhine. Like, they were really cool missions to play because they weren't repetitive to other missions. In the first game, it was a lot of just clearing out buildings and killing Nazis, and that was pretty much the only motive. In this game, it feels a lot more like you're helpful and that you actually have more objectives to do, which makes the game a lot more enjoyable. Now, overall, for this being the second game in the franchise, it was an amazing step up from the first game. Everything bad about the first game was fixed. Now, you getting to play on different sides gave a whole different perspective to the war, because you got to see what each power was doing at the time. Now, you do get to play as different sides in the first game, it's just not clear. Like in the first game, you sort of just switch sides all of a sudden, while in Call of Duty 2, it actually tells you that the British missions were unlocked, and you can even see it in Mission Select. And if it wasn't clear that you were in Russia anymore by you being in a desert. So yeah, this game is pretty much just a copy of the first game, but they subtracted all the flaws and enhanced everything good about the game. So I'm gonna give this game a 6 out of 10. It was overall an enjoyable game to play, and it's a game that I would definitely return to someday. If you've played this game, let me know in the comments what you think.